Hey, good morning, good afternoon, folks, or good evening, as the case may be.
Hey, Jared.
Bob, did you get your maintainer access to function go templating, was it?
I did. Thank you very
Right
much.
on. Excellent. Good. I don't think you need any coaching on how to be a maintainer, and it's not your first not your first repo.
Not my first rodeo. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go ahead and share my screen, but we'll definitely wait a little bit for folks to get started. I am not the host. That's odd. Oh boy. All right, hold on a second. Let me go figure this out. Ah, jeez. Yeah, I feel like we got all this because we switched over to using the Linux foundations or the CNCF's Zoom platform and stuff, and we ran a successful community meeting with that. And I thought we smoothed out all the wrinkles, so I'm not sure. Zoom is always has some surprises in store, I think. Hmm. Aha, there's a host key. I knew there was something. And I already put in a claim host. All right, there we go. Host key. Yes, I am host. Excellent. All right. Now let me start sharing my screen. There you go. Should see the agenda doc there. Hey Patrick, how's function the function you wrote, the Pythonic function you wrote going? It seems like you're getting some good feedback. People seem pretty excited about it.
I'm excited about it.
Well, other people are also.
Yeah, no, I've got some early adopters that are exploring it and doing some POC work. I think it's I've been poking in Crossplane for almost 2 years now, and finally finally had a project where basically we deployed out we've got this management cluster that deploys out EKS clusters. And we had a big crisis there where um, a composition or the composites got deleted, which actually caused some EKS clusters to get deleted, which was not pretty. And so I went, okay, I want to be able to bring up new composites that know about if there's a cluster already existing that it's about to create. So anyway, I integrated some Python to accomplish that task. And in the process, I finally grokked what run function proto is, what the protocol is. And so then I took a big step
Mm,
back and I said, what's the ultimate Python interface I want to that I could imagine creating to be able to implement all this. And I think I've created it. And it's an interesting application of Python, I think, in that it's a scripting language, so it's not compiled, so you're not constrained by your compile cycle and your release of that binary cycle. And but I just see writing everything in it for myself going forward. It implements the complete run function proto API. It
mm.
does everything. So you can do anything and everything any other function is doing. And
Yeah, and
I
I like
like
the I
it
like
because
the
it deploys
abstraction
pretty
on it,
easy.
that it
In a
really kind
scripting
of,
way.
yeah, exactly. It's like it provides a very nice abstraction of like, hey, you can just focus on, writing the Python for your like what you're actually trying to accomplish and not have to worry about any of like the mechanics of it.
Right, right.
That's awesome.
And and the latest. feature that I put in there is being able to deploy the core Python in config maps, and it automatically orchestrates the Python package path, basically the path to those, so you can develop it as these standalone Python files. And it actually brings up interesting implications that in that these Python, it lets you, a config map becomes a Python package that's available in the Python runtime. So not only can you implement the composite itself if that's what you want, and then in the composition, all in the step, all you have to do is refer to that Python class. But you can also distribute in these config maps libraries. So so it could very well be some useful utility library that you want available to your other Python packages, and
Oh,
or
interesting.
even something as simple as even you might distribute in the Python, again, useful packages, and then actually in the composition itself to you code it's just a small snippet of Python that you have to have there that is unique to that context of using it, but it pulls in the supporting library help that's been distributed in this config map. So
Yeah, I think it
it
definitely opens
opens
up
up
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
opportunities.
creative
Yeah.
possibilities.
Definitely. All right, cool. Let's get started then with the rest of the meeting here. All right, so I think recording had already started. So this is the August 21st, 2025 Crossplane community meeting. So basically the big thing that happened since we met last was that we shipped V2. That is out there, that is available for folks to install and use. There's definitely some folks that are already adopting it. And then spoiler alert for the later part of this meeting here, we don't have a ton of agenda today, but the later part here, I do want to hear folks' feedback on V2 in terms of what they're really happy that it has included, what might be missing, any sort of rough patches with adoption and all that sort of stuff. So be thinking about that now, so that when we get to that part of the agenda, folks have some ideas to be sharing. So let's do the normal routine though. Let's start going through milestones and the progress on that. So basically, since we shipped V2, and we did do a couple of patch releases as well. I should have put links to those. Actually, let's do that right now, so we can see that real quick. Crossplane releases. Yeah, so we got a 2.0, and then as I was starting to say, we did a couple of patch releases to fix critical issues that we found as well, which kind of delayed the fully production ready sort of instance for a little bit. Okay, sweet. So I think folks are pretty familiar by now with the feature set in V2. And if you're not, there's a really nice blog post that was written up here by Anna contributed a bunch to this, and then Nick and I did a little bit more to get it to the finish line here. But it kind of goes everything, all the big features for V2, kind of talks like why we were doing this. So it does provide pretty cool context, I think, in terms of understanding, what did we want to make Crossplane based on like the lessons that we learned over the last 5 years of running it in production, et cetera. So you can check out that blog post. It's in the links below in the content section as well. But yes, like I really just want to both congratulate and thank everybody for all the effort that was put into this release. It was a absolutely massive release with tons and tons of features, tons and tons of changes. And then like the attention that was put into doing everything we can to make it as backwards compatible as possible with V1. A lot of people put a lot of effort into that. So thank you everybody for all the work we put into it. I'm really proud of what we accomplished there. And so it's great to have that out and available and folks starting to use it. So then what's next? Well, 2.1 is next. So on our regular recurring schedule, that will be in early November of 2025. So, every quarter, 3 months from now. So we did early August for 2.0, and then 2.1 will be scheduled for early November. If you are privy to, or you stay up to date with the KubeCon schedule, that happens to coincidentally be right before KubeCon in Atlanta. So that'll be nice to have a release out that's, right, we're going into a KubeCon, and we can be able to talk about that and show that off to folks that are there in person in Atlanta and that watch the talks later on. So that'll be when 2.1 is out. And then, let's talk about the roadmap and some themes there. I will, in terms of transparency there, I think we have some more planning work to do here. 2.0 was just a massive focus of energy and people and such to get that out. And so now we kind of like need to take a bit of a step back and then focus on, what are the things we really want to deliver in a 2.1. And so that'll be helpful later on in this meeting too, when we're talking about, feedback from you all, what's missing and what you want to see and stuff like that. But some early thinking here is that, so many things, or so much churn and so many things change that it will be very smart and wise to spend some significant cycles in 2.1 on reliability as an overall theme. So for instance, this actually wasn't from 2.0 directly, but it was from 1.20 more so, when real-time compositions are, on by default, and, we have watches running instead of polling for doing reconciliations. And there are certainly some situations that are causing a storm of overactivity with reconciliation. So there's a couple of improvements in terms of how we're doing throttling and queues and all that sort of stuff, so that we're being a little bit more intelligent there, using resources more effectively, and having less impact on the control plane in some scenarios. So I think that's like a key area of reliability we need to be doing some progress on in 2.1. And then also, like things that affect the experience around Crossplane as well. Like for instance, resources that should be ready, but they're not showing that way. We're not catching those events or something like that. It leads to confusion about how the control plane and its health and stuff like that. So that sort of reliability area, I think, will be pretty important. And then right alongside of reliability is maturity as well, where we have, we've introduced, I think, at least 2 more new alpha APIs in 2.0, the operations, API, and then also managed resource definitions as well. So 2 more alpha APIs to the surface area of APIs in Crossplane. So we don't want to just continue accumulating features and APIs that never make it to GA. That's obviously not where we want to be in terms of maturity for the project. So we want to, I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, but this would certainly be an area of focus of maturing some of the key APIs. I probably would not. And Bob, what are you doing, by the way? I saw like 15 emails coming in of like GitHub notifications for what you're doing in the background right now.
I'm just cleaning up the mess that is function go templating.
Yeah, my screen is like, and Bob is super active right now. I appreciate your productivity, Bob.
The upbot seems to have some fundamental issues because it creates the same CVEs over and over and over again, and it's really annoying. So
that sounds like something that should be fixed. Welcome to your new maintainer role, Bob.
Yay.
So anyways, in terms of like, so the maturing features though, I think it would not be smart to just immediately try to mature the alpha features we introduced. We do want to have some feedback cycles on that. So like, how are people using operations? What is the shape of it correct? Like, are there, like rough patches that just really make it hard to use, et cetera. So I probably would not advocate for maturing like operations in 2.1. That probably doesn't make sense. Like, let's get some feedback, let's get some adoption, let's get some usage, and then do that in a later release, I think. But there are certainly some key APIs that have been in beta for a long time, like deployment runtime config is one of them I can think of. Management policies is another one. It would be nice to mature those and keep those moving. So we're kind of keeping our overall number of not GA APIs like constant. So that's probably what I would push for in terms of maturing APIs. I wouldn't do the brand new alpha ones, but I'd probably mature some of the older ones that it would be nice to go to GA. And then one other thing I'm thinking about as well is, and John, you're on the call here, so that's just like perfect for you too, is that, there are hungry folks that want to innovate and move faster on the Crossplane CLI. And so one thing we can do for that, two things we could do for that is enabling plugins so folks could do work outside of the core Crossplane source code repository to build things, but also like moving the whole CLI out of the Crossplane core repository and having it be its own thing, so it can have its own release cycle. It can move faster. It can have a different set of maintainers, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's something we'll probably want to make some moves on here, John, in this release. And you would be a key contributor and recipient of that, I would say.
Yeah, happy to. I have to pin down some time with Nick to figure out the strategy for that, but sounds like something we can do.
Right on. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I really it would be great to see that velocity then just like pick up and lots of cool stuff getting added and moving. So that would be sick, man. Cool. Oh, by the way, I should be doing this right now. I don't think I reached out to folks directly for this, so I apologize. But in 2.0, just like every release, we do a set of release MVPs. And so there are a few folks here that were kind of going above and beyond in the 2.0 milestone and really, really contributing and helping out a lot. So I just want to call those folks out now so they can see that. And spoiler alert, once again, Jonathan, you're one of them. You were in the list of release MVPs there, for your contributions to getting the CLI in a space where we can start, having it available for external dependencies and stuff. And then, all the feedback along the way. And then as well, organizing the SIG CLI and that sort of, passion that you're bringing to that is super awesome. And then also like your patience as well too, like how core maintainer team has been swamped and hasn't always been able to help at a rate as fast as we want to. So definitely a release MVP for all you've been contributing there, and thanks for that stuff, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I don't think they're on the call, but then Joe was here last week showing off some of the stuff he was doing with dev containers, so that which was pretty cool to enable an easy to use and adopt environment for just to pick up Crossplane code spaces and blah blah blah. So that's pretty cool. But also Joe was like on the bleeding edge. Like we would do like a new merge a PR. It would be in main. There would be a build for main that came out and Joe would have some feedback on it. So that was pretty dope seeing, really quick feedback happening as development work was ongoing. And then Got Where Lost, if folks didn't see it, built a function HCL. So if you like HCL as a language, instead of configuration language, instead of, the Pythons or the Go templating and KCL and all that stuff, like that's an option now as well. So I think that's a huge donation, which to the Crossplane contribute bro, which is really cool to see. So all those folks and everybody else who's contributing, especially, thank you very much for that effort. Bob, did you have something to add? Because you weren't on mute, but I don't know if that was just because I was razzing you for all the notifications I was getting.
Yeah, I think that was left over from that.
Cool. Awesome. And then, so the rest of the 2.1 milestone, we need to figure that out. It's kind of early in the cycle here, and we have some breathing room after shipping 2.0. So there will be more thoughts and more planning for the roadmap here. And let's when we get to the end of the agenda here, we'll talk more about that from everybody else. So as always, there's a number of ways to get involved, and so you can click these links and see what the P0, P1 issues are that have been triaged, and we're always happily accepting folks to be able to help out with that stuff. So yeah, those resources are available there. Okay, let's see. Let's go down to the next section then, and talk about provider ecosystem stuff. So, a core part of the Crossplane V2 release was, enabling namespaced resources by default. And so that also then, requires a change on the provider side for them to be able to have namespaced resources to be able to, reconcile them and control external resources and compose them and all that sort of stuff. So the major providers for Crossplane Contrib have been updated to support namespace resources. I think a really important thing to remember here is that we're basically now in a transitional period now, and it's not going to be a short one, but it's a transitional period where V1 style, everything's cluster scoped. V2 is things are namespaced by default. And so to kind of support both of those cases at the same time and not completely break everybody, the providers basically have both cluster scope and namespace scope resources, that they ship with. So like that will be that way, I think, for quite a while, and we'll really need to think about how that ever, gets appropriately deprecated or removed over time. That's not going to be a short-term thing, and we're not going to talk about that today or figure that out today. But all the major providers now have namespace scope resources, and so this is a pretty, I think, an important time to remind folks that where is it? Yeah, here we go. Definitely a kind of a bit of a warning here is that, to support both cluster scoped and namespace scoped, there's basically double the resources in each provider. And so a critical part of the V2 release was being able to support not installing all of those resources at the same time. So there is a facility now of being pretty specific about what you want to install. So if you want to just do V2 only stuff, you're like a new cluster or new resources, and you only want to do namespace stuff, you can basically use like a managed resource activation policy and just say like, star.m.crossplane.io or whatever to say, I only want V2 stuff. And that's all the CRDs that will be installed in your cluster, and the cluster scoped ones won't even be installed. So that's really important to know, or to be able to have that facility if, you want to be constrictive of the number of resources that providers like install into your cluster. So do remember that. But yeah, a bunch of providers got updated basically. So check those out. They're available, and namespace resources are now a thing, and you can start doing stuff with them. Any questions on that around the provider side, ecosystem side? I think we'll have a long tail here too of, I don't know how many projects we have now in the Crossplane contrib organization, the community extensions, but there's multiple tens of them, right? I don't know, 50, 60, something like that. So, they're not all updated all at once. So that will be, it's kind of I think that'll be a kind of a call to the community of like, hey, we're going to need help doing those and updating those over time. Maintainer teams will need to follow up and start providing namespace scope resources as well. So, help with that will definitely be appreciated. I think that there is some still a follow-up here to kind of provide more prescriptive guidance to provider maintainers and contributors on how to do that. I think that we need a little bit more documentation on like, what do you do? There's a couple of like example PRs to follow, but not, more prescriptive guidance. So I think that's something that's missing that we should be following up on to be able to enable and empower people to upgrade providers to support namespace resources.
I did want to gently poke the pull request we have out there for provider NOP.
Provider NOP
to do that,
yeah,
because that one is used in the tests for other stuff. So I'm trying to test things that require namespace resources out of the NOP provider, and they're not there yet.
Yep. That's a really, really good point, John. I totally agree with that one. Yeah, and I think I would like to do that ASAP now that I got the chance to go to Seattle for the first part of this week and sit in a room with Scott and Nick, and got back to San Diego late last night. So now I can start catching up again with some of that stuff that's near the top of the list to enable folks. So thanks for that reminder. I think that we should follow up ASAP. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so that's provider ecosystem stuff then. Let's keep on moving down here and go to the rest of the stuff. Let's see. So in terms of like content and things, we already talked about the Crossplane blog post. So, 2.0 blog post. So do read through that and get a better understanding of why 2.0 was done, that was created, and what it did. And then also I kind of wanted to call this out too, a post from the CNCF of, I guess they do it twice a year, not just once a year. Clearly it syndicates twice a year. But they do kind of a project health, contributor engagement sort of look at all the projects around the ecosystem. And, they explicitly called out Crossplane as one of the projects in that one this time, mentioning how the contributor base continues to grow and how more folks are getting involved and stuff like that. So it's super rad to see that. that the CNCF is noticing the growth we're seeing and people participating and stuff like that. So happy to see that. Happy to see the CNCF noticing us as well. Okay, cool. So yeah, so let's jump into the feedback stuff. So hopefully I gave enough of a heads up for folks that you all were thinking and preparing some of your thoughts on it, because I think this is pretty important. Where we did V2, there was a lot of like participation in it as well, but like as people are adopting it and actually using it, we definitely want to hear from folks of what are people really happy about, or what are some of the things that need some more work. So I'll open the floor to anybody who's using V2 or even looked at it, and like, also not just feedback, but questions too. Like, are there the things you're confused about? Like, what can I do to help out folks better understand V2 right now? Nobody yet. Everybody understands V2 and it's perfect?
I can say a few things.
All right, Scott.
From my side. So I have been playing with V2 since the initial betas, all of that. Overall, it has been relatively smooth, except for some of the providers that things do not work in the namespace scope things. Still, like there's issues with references that were missing in the AWS. I think Azure and AWS providers had some issues that I've seen that are being worked on, but issues with references, cross-resource references don't work. A lot
Scott,
of times.
Is the scope of that like 100% like the namespace resource, cross namespace resources don't work, or is it like this resource and this resource?
Some resources, and yeah, and that have and it's mostly AWS provider, because AWS has unique elements of how different resources work with regions and without regions, and sometimes region and sometimes not region, and what the provider requires versus doesn't, even though it shouldn't.
That's a nice way to say that, Scott. Thank you for your tact.
Exactly. It's about the most honest way of speaking about AWS. Kind of sometimes, maybe, when, if, how.
There are a lot of conditionals in that.
Yes. But so there's been a lot of issues around that. I will say, is because I maintain also a bunch of smaller providers and whatever that we use and whatever. It's impossible today to create new providers, because the Upjet versus the Upjet provider template are out of sync completely, and do not work without a lot of manual changes that are not documented anywhere. So no one can create a new provider today without deep diving into fixing things. And there is no good examples really for PRs for upgrading a non-family provider, non-forked mode, or what in the two different modes of how to call Terraform, but the way the provider works still with the CLI invocation or whatever. There's no good examples of a PR for upgrading those types of providers that are the majority of the ones that are not the family main upbound, mostly maintained providers. So for someone to figure that out is not fun today. And I think that holds back a lot of adoption of V2 from what I'm seeing from people.
That is a great point, Scott. 100% agree with that one. And emphasize like the importance of not necessarily contributor enablement, but provider maintainer enablement to because there's so many freaking providers out there, right? Which is a great thing for the ecosystem and having variety of what you can do with Crossplane. But providing the tooling and knowledge to make that easier for that broad, long tail of providers to be able to be updated and compatible with V2 and have namespace resources and be the future of Crossplane is super, super important. So I'm really glad you called that out, and I 100% agree with it.
Yeah, I would. So I mean, that's definitely one thing. The other thing I can say is that a lot of things were very unclear during the release process that caused a lot of havoc. With the 2 was released but wasn't released. Like now it says Upjet 2 is released here even, but there is no tag of 2 or a release of Upjet 2. There is of Crossplane, but there's a tag but no release in Upjet of 2.0. There's no like it's very like staggered what has a release, what doesn't have a release. The latest release of Upjet is 1.9. So that caused a lot of confusion, I think, as well.
Yeah. So if you want to like, if you have a provider and you want to update to, okay, like what is the officially blessed, 2.0 tooling to be able to generate my provider with, like, there's not a 2.0 tag to like bump up
There's a
to.
tag, there's no release of Upjet though, and every other
Oh,
release
there
that
is a
there has
tag,
been of
okay.
Upjet, there has been a release with the release notes with something about what you should change between releases, what breaking changes, anything. There's nothing for 2.0. There's a git tag.
Got
But
it.
there is
So
no
yeah, the
release.
only thing is the tag, right? And yeah, and that goes back into that whole document, like, no notes, no guidance, no documentation about, how the rest of the ecosystem can start adopting this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
That would be just my feedback. Overall, it's been working well, V2. It's just mostly around the provider ecosystem and Upjet specifically. That's documentation is always the hardest thing in an open source project. So I get that. But yeah.
Yeah, right on. I think there's kind of yeah, I think everything is spot on, Scott. 100% agree with all of your feedback there. And yeah, it definitely highlights like the challenge of kind of the scope of the provider ecosystem and the like, especially like the big cloud provider, the hyperscaler providers, like each one of those, just upgrading one of those was a challenge in itself with, like 1,000 resources each, et cetera. And then, on top of that, like, okay, how do we take these lessons and make sure that folks of other providers that, may be at different types of architectural approaches, like, non-family approach, non-forked approach, all that sort of stuff. Like that matrix is not a small matrix. So it definitely highlights the challenges of keeping all that stuff up to date and providing the right guidance for all of it too. So it's a challenge, but it's one that needs to be solved.
And I completely agree. And I think that in 2.1, if focus can be put on the Upjet framework, there has been for about the last year, it has been mentioned that Upjet will be adding support for the new framework versions of Terraform, for example. But we were waiting for 2.0 to do that for a redesign of supporting the generated in cross because they use Terraform Crossplane. So it seems that Upjet, if that can get love in 2.1, just hearing from what I'm hearing, I would say, to grow the ecosystem.
And and I'm not as up to date on that stuff as I am with like more core Crossplane stuff. But do any of the Terraform licensing issues come into play with that stuff specifically,
Not at
Scott, or
all.
that is totally
Not at all.
unrelated?
This is
Okay,
stuff that's
good,
been
good,
around
good.
for way before the licensing issues. It's issues on how they generate their schemas of different resources and different schema types that they have in resources in Upjet. In Terraform that you have to convert into the schema that Upjet is using, basically.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense then. Perfect. Cool. Yeah, thanks for all that, Scott. Really, really helpful. Who else? What else is things that you all want to see, and kind of feedback into 2.1 and continuing to improve V2, or questions about how things work or anything?
So this is probably a me problem. But we went through a vaguely unpaved upgrade path, right? Like we didn't hit 120 first. And then we went to V2 preview, and V2 preview was working. And then we went from V2 preview to V2, and that was bad. At the same time as we tried to do the change from the Upbound providers to the Crossplane contrib providers, I ended up having to like manually edit the lock file for the provider dependency resolution, because we had some providers that were still looking at the Upjet family provider, the Upbound family provider, which no longer existed. And then the new ones that were trying to take ownership from Crossplane contrib were not able to get ownership of the CRDs that they were trying to own, because the owner refs to the AWS, the Upbound AWS family provider were still there. It wasn't able to assert its ownership because it was already owned by something else, but that something else didn't exist anymore. So I feel like there could be some work done on keeping that state healthy, like recognizing that, hey, this provider doesn't exist anymore. When you go through that like ownership resolution stuff, like if I'm trying to own something and the previous thing that used to claim to own it doesn't exist anymore, maybe let it. I don't know. I'm not deeply familiar with the way that stuff works in Crossplane's reconciliation loops and things like that, but there could be some
Yeah.
attention paid to getting us out of the mess that we got ourselves into.
Yeah. And John, was to clarify, was the source of that, because there could be a couple of different parts of the upgrade there. One is, upgrading from 1.20 to 2.0 core crossplane, and then the other one is like upgrading providers as well. So it
Changing
seems like
families,
like that was more of the issue, was like going from a provider A to provider B than it was just core crossplane 1.20 to 2.0.
It's hard to say because it was the same pull request from like we did kind of that at the same time. So I'm not sure.
Like to your GitOps declaration of stuff in the cluster. Okay, got it. Cool. Yeah, and this is specifically not what you're saying, John, but it kind of jogs my memory a little bit too. I am concerned about the fragility of our core crossplane upgrades, where we did, I think, a very good job. This is not gonna designs, no contributing. I think we did not that one, this one. We did a great job, I think, of defining with Kubernetes CRD versioning constraints. Given that as a foundation, I think we did a great job of understanding what we as core maintainers need to do to evolve our APIs safely. But the major Achilles heel to that is that you basically have to, we've done everything we need to for going from version 1.2.3.4, but that puts the burden on the end user to not skip versions of, like, they're on 1.18, they're like, cool, 2.0 is out, I'm going to 2.0. There's going to be a problem with that if you don't do 1.19, 1.20, 2.0. So that's super fragile. Like, it may be an okay constraint to require that, but we don't enforce it. So people, end up shooting themselves in the foot because they're like, yeah, I'll just update, and then you're broken. So like, maybe there's some changes we could do so it's not that restricted of enabling you to make that jump. That would be amazing, but also a first step that's would make the problem better just by itself is like having some sort of hooks or something like that like stops the upgrade or doesn't let you do that, like doesn't let you get in that situation, and kind of make sure that you're staying within the guardrails, would also be an improvement over where we're at today. It's just too fragile today, and I'm pretty concerned about it.
I've seen charts run upgrade jobs, right? Where the job itself spins up a container that contains whatever logic is necessary to get you from where you are to where you're going, and maybe the contents of that job can be more robust than like a simple hook.
Yeah, absolutely, and that might be the right approach here too, because we have upgrade logic in core crossplane, like in the init container, but the big problem with that approach there is that it's coupled to the version of Crossplane of like, okay, cool, you install the new version. Now init container's ready to go do its work, but oh shoot, we're already on this version, and the stuff I might have needed to do work on to migrate or get updated is gone. Now it's like kind of too late in the process, in the life cycle, right? So that job thing there, that's like Scott was saying something like that too, of an approach there that's not strictly bounded to or not being too late to run, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. Bob, you were mentioning something in the chat that looks related though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess, go on, Bob.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically what you guys are talking about, run a pre-upgrade job in the Helm chart that says, if you're going to 1.20, you better be running 1.19. Otherwise fail the job. Obviously it's not, it's a prevention method to keep you from getting in trouble. It's not ideal. I mean, ideally you would separate the data model out and be able to evolve the data model separately from the application, but I don't know how you do that realistically.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the era of like renovate bots and things, right? Where you're running 30 different pieces of cluster infrastructure, right? You're running the load balancer controller and you're running the auto scaling apparatuses, and everybody has this huge like maintenance footprint, and it's kind of intractable to do it all on your own. So people run things like Renovate, where it'll automatically say, oh, there's a new version of this Helm chart. And I'll create a new pull request to get you up onto that latest version of it. And I think that's the scenario where you'll end up with people running 18, and then they finally get around to doing the upgrade and they go to 21 or something like that,
100%.
right?
And that's a totally reasonable expectation to be able to do that. We accept, we say yes to Renovate PRs all the time. That's like, going from some old version to the newest. Like that would be really nice. Yeah. So there's some pain there. I'm feeling it personally too. Anything else from folks? Any other ideas or feedback or anything? Questions on V2? It's good discussion so far.
The one thing I would just add on that last point, Aaron, is that like the easiest way to do this is say only minor version upgrades, but there have been many Crossplane releases where you do not actually need to go to every release. And what will be really nice is if in the testing, actually, and I know it's harder, but in the testing of before a release, and it's validated that we don't have breaking changes that require me to go from 117 till 120 directly, then the upgrade job for 120 when it gets released should say, hey, you can upgrade from 117, 18, 19 to 20. Right? We shouldn't be just hard coding that you have to go to every release, because there are many times, even in Kubernetes, yes, technically you have to upgrade every version. You don't necessarily always have to. There have been edge cases where you didn't need to, depending on what you were using in your cluster. But they didn't change that. In an add-on like this, it would be really nice just to not need to do more upgrades than needed, but still have that safety.
Yep. That's a really good point of like, if you don't need to, then don't force people to take an extra step.
Exactly. And just that's where the upgrade job becomes possible to do something like that, I think.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right, well, that's everything I had that I wanted to go over the agenda here. Like, the most important thing for me today was, listening to folks and connecting about V2 stuff. So I didn't have anything else. Is there anything else folks wanted to bring up then before we adjourn? All right, that sounds like it's it then. Cool. Well, good to see everybody this week. Excited to get started on 2.1. Maybe catch our breaths for a little bit though. That was a lot of effort to get V2 out, but really excited to see the response on it. Excited to see everyone's engagement and enthusiasm and great ideas and feedback. So thanks everybody for being here today. It's good to see all y'all.